Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Arrive and Drive. I am Jordan Mystic, going to be your host for this evening because Nate Martha Geteller decided to not join us because he decided to take a very long fat nap. So, with me tonight, I have my boys, Florida man Jed Perkins, and Smoogly Boogly himself, Zach Buchanan. We also got ourselves a special guest tonight as well. So, boys, let me bring you guys in. How we doing?
Doing good.
Pretty good. Pretty good.
Doing all
So
right.
what was that nickname for me, by the way? What say that again?
It's your boy Smoogly Boogly. Did you know that from one of your videos?
I kind
Oh,
of
actually, it wasn't your video. It was Bobby's video. One of Bobby's video when you went. I think you crashed or something, and then he played an edit, and it was you talking to his camera.
I don't remember this.
You don't remember?
No.
I have to show you at the end of this show, but that's the
that better be
context.
clipped in.
Good morning, Twitterville. It's your boy Spoobly Goobly.
That better be clipped in.
It's gonna be clipped in after that.
Man, okay.
So I'm gonna also welcome our guest here tonight, and it's gonna be Ryan Bjerke. He races cars he raced F1600 and he raced Radical coming back just last year and everything. So Ryan, welcome to the Driver Drive show.
Thank you for having me, Jordan and Zach and Jed.
So with that being said, we're gonna kind of get things started with our show. Generally, when we have a guest on board, we generally like to start talking about the guests, get into their experience a little bit, and then we get into the main topic of the show. So Ryan, we'll start with you first. How did you get your start into racing, and where did you find your passion into it?
So, my passion started really, really young. My dad kind of screwed himself. He took me to the 500 when I was 4 years old. But it all kind of started back with my dad. He raced sports cars back in the day in the Firehawk Challenge, Trans Am, and in IMSA. He never wanted me to get into it. In fact, it took from the time I was 4, it was constant begging until I was 7 years old for him to finally take me to the go-kart track. And he took me to Michiana Raceway Park up in South Bend, Indiana, and got my first go-kart and loved it from that point forward. Won my first championship the year after I started, and it was off to the races.
Now you ended up winning the Road Tax Minimax Championship, and I believe it was 2009. I mean, what do you remember about that year? Because that's a pretty big deal, you know.
So it was 2010, and okay. I was very close. I was pretty close to winning it in 2009 as well. We had a couple bad races, but that year was awesome. I actually started off that year with a broken arm. I did my first 2 races with a cast. I had my dad's old shifter carts jacket, racing jacket, so I looked like a red Michelin man going down the track. But no, that was an awesome year. It was just one of those magical years where there wasn't anything you could do to be beaten. It was the best feeling I've ever had in my we rode that coattail for a while. That was when I was driving for PKT, the importer for Aero Karts at the time with Eric Jones, and it was a great time. And then shortly after that, we had switched to OTK, and I ran those for a very long time as well.
You're bringing 1995 Terra Lavani vibes by racing with a broken hand there at the end. How was it like racing with a broken hand? It had to be obviously painful for one to start off racing a go-kart, but how did you were able to manage it?
Well, to be honest, it wasn't my first time doing it, and I've actually raced with a broken hand on 4 different occasions. Twice with my right, twice with my left. It wasn't that bad. It wasn't that bad because we were fully committed, especially after the second time I broke it. Because I always ended up breaking it right before race season started. So we always had a spare steering wheel, and when I'd get my cast molded, I'd bring it in and have them mold the cast to the steering wheel so I could still drive.
Jeez, no, that's commitment.
That's crazy.
That's definitely
the fact that you have a spare steering wheel just in case you break your hand and you have to mold a cast to it. I don't know if it's an accomplishment or impressive.
Yeah.
I was pragmatic when I was a kid. That's for sure. There were many times where I wasn't showing up on crutches or in casts or boots or whatnot.
All right, so you're just like every other kid, has no fear, no nothing, and it breaks every bone. You live through it.
Pretty much, yep. And I also learned I do not belong on two wheels because 3 out of those 4 brakes were on scooters. So,
Jeez.
Wow.
So, you were one of the, I remember just from you telling me this, you were one of the youngest, I think the youngest at the time to get your SCCA competition license. How old were
yep,
you?
I was 13 years old,
Okay.
and I did my SEC. I got that back in 2013.
Okay.
So, or no,
Okay.
2012, end of 2012, going into 2013.
Okay.
All right.
So you were 13.
I did my skip barber school.
Yeah. So you moved
Yeah.
into F1600s and won a bunch of races. And then
Yeah.
at some point you ended up living in Australia, right? End of high school?
Yeah. Yeah. So at the end of high school, I was I got picked up by Liz Tech Race Cars. They're they're an F1600 car manufacturer over in Australia. They wanted me to come over and develop a car for them that would eventually come into the United States, and we've been trying, but the car was finally finished right when COVID hit, so it's been difficult to get it over here. But I got picked up to go drive with them, and I lived over in Australia for a couple for 2-3 months when my senior year of high school. I graduated early. Um, and then just hung out down there. It was a great time. I learned a lot. I got to race against guys like Hunter McElroy, Cameron Shields, and I learned really quickly that to them, open wheel racing is a contact sport. And I distinctly remember when I first went there that because I had built every single F1600 car that I had driven, I had built myself. Between me and my dad, we had built every single car. And I distinctly remember when I first got there, I was like, man, these control arms are super heavy and they're super thick. Man, these things could take a nuclear bomb. First national race, I figured out why they were built that thick. Because if we had the aircraft material that we have here in the States for our open wheel cars, and they would just fold.
Yeah.
But no, that was a great time. I wish I could go back. I miss those boys.
Yeah, for sure. Racing against Cameron Shields and Hunter McElroy myself. Those boys, they have elbows out racing, and they
All
like to
the
use up
time.
every single bit of the track, and they will stand their ground. You know,
Oh, yeah.
they're not any pushovers or anything. You either need to move them out of the way, or you need to just kind of push yourself through in order to get past them.
It's very much a respect thing. If you give them the same amount of respect that they gave you, then you have a lot less issues with guys like that. It was very much the same in karting too, because I race against guys like Santino Ferrucci, Pato Award, Kyle Kirkwood, and all those guys. And like 2010, we went to the Rotax Grand Nationals, and I showed up with 10 front bumpers and 10 rear bumpers, and I was down to 2 sets by the end of the weekend, because that's just the way the racing was. That was long before pushbacks. We went through 8 front noses, and like it wasn't uncommon for us to come back with bumpers just hanging off. And at the time, if somebody hit you and it broke off, you wouldn't necessarily get a penalty if it wasn't like flailing out to the side. If it was still in line but dragging on the ground, they didn't care too much.
Man, we talk about how the racing world has changed. You know, we talk about how NASCAR and like the biggest parts of open wheel racing have changed. Even the go-karts, you know, the philosophy and the theory has changed of how you go to the racetrack with like 8 bumpers and you're basically going until the bumper falls off, to now we have rules that if your bumper gets pushed back a little bit, you're getting a penalty or getting disqualified from the race.
I have one of my old front noses from my OTKs that has all the war wounds. One sec.
Just getting the evidence out.
Here we go.
Speaking of a hot topic, pushback bumpers. We could go on and on about that. I could at least. That's wow.
Yeah, that's pretty.
That's bad. A lot of curbage.
That's a lot of.
The duct tape is the only thing preventing me from being able to fit my whole arm inside the nose.
Jeez.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
that was one season.
So at some point you end up moving back to the States, and you end up actually out here in St. Louis, kind of bridge the gap, you know, from, you know, your time in Australia to where you are now. Obviously, you've tested the USF car, you've tested F1600 here in the States, and I'm not going to name names or team names or anything like that, but you did test for a couple teams, and one of which are now in Road to Indy. Kind of tell us your experience over the last couple of years, you know, in cars and also your engineering stuff.
Yeah, so I moved to St. Louis because I got accepted into St. Louis University in the mechanical engineering program. I always figured that if I couldn't find the money to go race myself,
Mhm.
the worst case is I'd go engineer them. It's kind of my second passion. I really do enjoy it, not as much as hopping in the car, but I'm fairly good at engineering the cars because that's what I had to do to be able to keep racing. But I moved down here to St. Louis to because I had some family in the area because my mom's from St. Louis, and I kept racing throughout that entire time. My schedule didn't really change that much. Part of the reason why I'm taking 5.5 years to graduate is because I missed so much school to go race. But
Yeah.
we so during that time I was fortunate enough to test USF 2000 cars, engineer on F3 cars, test F3 cars. I got to do a lot of cool stuff my first 3 or 4 years of college, and about 2 years ago my dad and I found Radical. We were looking to go into Radical Cup, but we found a Radical on eBay for 38 grand, and we snatched it right up. And later that year, that's when I actually got to race against Jordan at Road Atlanta. That was my first weekend ever in the car, and we got we podium. We didn't podium, but we got a top 5 the first weekend.
Yeah, 38 grand's not bad to snatch a Radical up, that's for sure. Especially with the price tag they go for nowadays, which could be
Oh,
upwards around 90 to
oh,
100.
oh yeah. When we bought the car, our check didn't go to the guy; it went to the shop the car was in.
There you go.
That's how we got that car. It was very very like the guy was in a tight spot with money and he owed the shop a lot of money. So we were able to snatch the car up, and my dad's an ex-champ car engineer, so we were able to fix it up pretty quickly, and we got it running in all the right ways. And this year we took that same car, and it's the older model car. It's the RS. So we're down on power compared to the SX, to the RSX and the XXX.
Hmm.
But we took that car and we were top 5 all 3 races at New Jersey and podiumed in one of them.
So kind of let's circle back a little bit. So you said your dad, ex-champ car engineer, worked for Swift. Your dad's a racer himself. Kind of circle back. I mean, even before you were born, your dad had the opportunity to race at the Rolex.
Yeah.
And I gotta say, your family has a history with injuries. Kind of run the story by us of
It
why
runs
your
in the
dad
family,
did
I
not
guess.
race the Rolex.
Yeah. So my dad was signed to go race the Rolex. I can't remember the year off the top of my head. I think it was 90.
I think that's what
It
you
was
told
either
me.
89
Yeah.
or 90.
Yeah.
But so he was going to race, and they were like within a month out of the race. Like I think it was 2 weeks. And he was playing volleyball with his sponsors at Goodyear, and he went up to go for a spike and hyperextended his knee and blew out his ACL and MCL.
Ooh.
And they sat him, and he couldn't race a car for 2 years. And that was back in the old days where the recovery time for an injury like that was around 2 years, and especially as much damage as he had caused. So he wasn't able to do that race, and the dagger for it all was the team and car that he was set to drive in ended up winning in its class in the sports car class.
Man, that's rough.
So that's kind of my dream, is to right the wrongs, because I feel like my family in a way was a little bit robbed from being in the Rolex, let alone winning it. So that's my dream, is to get into the Rolex and actually race and do what my dad couldn't do.
It's like that, how should I say, the saying of missing rings in this case.
Yeah.
So now you got to try to go get the missing watch.
Yep, exactly.
Man, that's like one cool, like not only like that, the fact that that's a bucket list race, one of the biggest races in the world to win, but like,
If not the biggest.
well, one of the biggest.
One of.
That's what I said at least. But to get a Rolex on top of it, but like that's the cherry on top. That is like a cool trophy.
It makes it even sadder that Townsend Bell got 2 of his stolen from his house.
What?
Yeah, that was happened a few years ago.
So heated if that happened.
See, because the thing with the Rolex of the 24 is it's the only trophy that you really could carry around with you anywhere you go.
Yeah.
Like, and you could show off to everybody. Like, trophies they get put away in a trophy case, and you got to have people either come to your house or you got to have a TV crew come in, record it all, so that way people are able to see it. Whereas a Rolex, hell, you could just show it off to the whole world, and people will be like, "That's a cool watch." It's like, yeah, I won this watch.
Or
Yeah.
or a 500 ring. I feel like people
That
don't really
too.
wear those as much, but it's
That's the
possible.
thing. Like, I feel like when it comes to like a championship ring or like a 500 ring, that's like you only bring it out for special events.
True.
Where I feel like the Rolex watch is kind of the same thing, but it also could be used as an item that you bring out every single day. You could use it as a daily item.
Tom Brady rolling out. It's just freaking every knuckle has.
Hey, Ryan, Ryan, I'm gonna
So-
circle
Oh,
back
he's
on
got 7 of them.
because this kind of caught my attention when you said it.
Yeah.
So, in 2 weeks from now, I'm racing Cup Kart Spring Nationals, and I've already had to start working ahead on my schoolwork, because I got to be on top of my major, my classes, just making sure I don't fall behind, because it's basically a 5-day event, driving up to Charlotte and back, set up, all that. I mean, you know how it is. How you want to give some advice on your experience for like not only me but for any other kids listening, because obviously when you're in middle school and stuff, it doesn't really matter, but once you get into high school and then eventually college, it gets so tough to balance racing and school. Unless you got like an online program, it's almost impossible.
Yeah.
From my experience, now I'm not the best student in the world, but I've been able to keep with it. But what helped me the most was realizing that I needed to take a break. And yeah, racing is my passion and that's what I want to do, but it's not necessarily a break. I'm going to give it absolutely my all the time. So it's not that chance to relax. So what I tended to do is the first day I'd get back from a race weekend, that was my relaxation day. I'd go to class, but I would, if I had to do work, I would do it. But if I didn't have to, that was my relaxation day. And then I would wake up at 6:30 in the morning the next day, get in bright and early, go for a run, and then work on the schoolwork for the entire next day. And that was pretty much that. You have to section it off. You can't do one subject for 3 hours. For me, who I struggle with attention issues, I have to split it up. I had to do like my applied thermo for an hour, and then I'd switch to my physics homework for an hour, and then I'd circle back, because if I kept focusing on one thing, I just ended up getting a mental block. So you have to give yourself the time.
I'll weigh in a little bit here too, from experience of actually working on homework to go to NASCAR races in middle school to eventually having to work on college work going into actually racing myself. The one thing when I found out in middle school is you need to have a good relationship with your teachers first off. You need to have a really good relationship with your professors, because they're going to be the ones to allow you to go race, and they're going to be the ones to allow you to do what you're able to do on the road, whether you're at the track or you're on the road going to the track. Now, once you get the work, I try to get as much as I can done on the road before you get into any of the action, because the last thing you want to do is on the race weekend be worried about your schoolwork when you should be worried about racing a car.
Yep, and I've had weekends like that. Even especially when I was working for D-Force, I was working on their. I was a floater mechanic for their Indy Pro program, and there were nights where we'd get done with the cars at 10 o'clock at night, and I'd be working on homework until 2 in the morning, and then have to be up at 4 a.m. to make it to the track. Yeah. So, but
go ahead, Ryan.
Getting it done before I got to the race weekend was paramount. Like I would pull an all-nighter, but then I'd sleep on the plane right there, or or if I was traveling with somebody else to go to the race, then I would say, "Hey, can you take the first shift? Because I can't. I need to get some rest."
Yeah. And the next thing I would say is try not to divert from your normal schedule as much. I would try to stay on, like, if you have a pattern of subjects that you get done or you have a workflow pattern, I would continue to stay with that, but also get a lot of work in advance and then try to jump ahead of the curve before you get back, because you need to be able to get caught back up by the time you get back, because the last thing you want to do is do a little bit of work, come back, and then find out that you're behind and you need to catch up double time when you get back. That was always the worst that happened to me.
Listen to Jordan. I did not take that advice.
It was the worst. But another thing, to Ryan's point too, I had this happen when I was down at Homestead uh, 2 years ago, back in 2020 when the pandemic happened. This was when online was actually happening, and it was actually a benefit to me to where I could go race in the car. You have like a mind that you could switch on and switch off, to where you get into race mode when you're at the track, but then once you get back to the hotel, you're back into school mode and you're trying to get as much as you can done that was taking part that day, just so you can kind of stay on track to what's happening back home at school.
I will say it's not easy to go away
No.
for a race weekend
No.
and have to worry about school. Now, I was in a similar situation with this. 2020 CKNA Grand Nationals. I was wrenching for Trevor Eggemeyer that weekend, and so actually his dad was in the hospital, and so I went with Trevor. So we went Thursday, and then we practice day Friday, heats
Saturday, and then the final Sunday.
and then
and it was raining too.
Yeah, it was just a miserable weekend in many ways, but like it was cool for me because I learned a lot, being a wrench that weekend, and I was one of 3 people working on his cart. So like it was, there were many minds going into this, but it was just stressful because we'd be there all day at the track, and you come home, and you go back to your hotel after eating and everything, and just to try to focus on, accomplishing work, because we were in 2 classes with 1 cart. So we were constantly switching weights, trying to keep up on notes, for each setup to make sure that, okay, this is what we did the last time. We got to make sure we do this for this class. We do this for this class. And it was just, it was very mentally draining. But it's not a good time if you have to do work at the track, or, if you're away from home, you have to do work. It's a lot easier to just get it done out of the way first.
I tell you, man, it's tough, because you're at the track the entire day, and that takes up from like 8 o'clock in the morning till around 5 or 7 o'clock at night, and it takes up the whole entire day. It's mentally draining because you're focusing on what you're doing at the racetrack. Then you got to go home, open the laptop or the book, and try to use the same amount of energy that you just drained all day at the racetrack to get your schoolwork done. And you're using that time normally to relax. Like you want to just lay in bed, just see what's on your phone or watch TV and just relax for the next day. But then you got to be back at the hotel worrying about schoolwork and you're doing. It makes it very frustrating. It makes it a very headache. You don't even want to do it, but it's just something you have to overcome.
For sure. Hey, Ryan, tell us what you got planned for this year. You got any plans to go racing this year that you can tell us at least?
Well, I'm doing some stuff with my family team. There's some other stuff in the works, but I've been in the sport a long time. I know that you jinx yourself more times if you keep your mouth open about stuff that could happen. But stuff that will happen this year, I'm definitely gonna do at least the Watkins Glen race in Radical Cup. Hopefully, I can do Road America as well, and possibly a couple WRL runs with a car that my dad and I built.
Sweet.
So
nice.
It'll be cool because we'll get my little brother out there. He's a pretty good racer too. So, and it's been a long time since I've been on track with him. So,
WRL,
and then of course we're
WRL is good because it's kind of an affordable way to go racing. Honestly,
it is. It's much more affordable than other ways, and SCCA now has created their own endurance series as well, which we may run because they're running at Nelson's Ledges, which we were talking before.
Yeah.
That's my dad's home track, so that's
nice.
That's a bucket list for me and my little brother, and we'll probably force my dad to do a stint just for the sake of it.
I'm sure your dad wouldn't complain about that too much.
I don't know. He complains a lot when it involves him squeezing into tight spaces.
Just have him get
he's
on
not
the
a small man.
He's
a big dude.
Have him get on the treadmill a little bit, shave some pounds off.
There you go.
There's a segment we like to do every week that we call "Dumb Things to Do on the Racetrack." So Ryan Bjerke, what is one, or at least it could be multiple things actually.
It could be something that you witnessed or you've done.
Something that you witnessed or you've done. A dumb thing on the racetrack. What you got?
This one's pretty stupid. So I was so we were testing. We were testing karts for the for a Rotax Pan American race up at MRP, and my brother and I were both running, but he was in Mini Max and I was in Junior Max. And the speed difference between Mini Max and Junior is probably about can be 10 miles an hour. It's probably about 10 miles an hour at MRP. So the thing with the Rotax, if you look down at the gauge and you see you're about to hit 12,000 RPM, you hop in the seat and you shoot to 14,000 RPM. It's what we called hitting the turbo. So I was looking at my gauge going down the front straightaway because I saw my brother up ahead, and I was like, all right, I bet I have enough time to hit turbo and get a great lap in. So I look down at my gauge, I hop, and I look back up, and my brother is right there. He had slowed down to let me by. And I flipped and totaled 2 brand new OTKs on a test day, and the other one was my little brother. So I wrote because I wasn't paying attention, and there was the biggest crash that my brother had ever been in. Unfortunately, it wasn't the biggest crash I had been in, but it was up there, and I bent the hell out of 2 brand new OTKs. It was bad.
So it's interesting that you say that. I have an idea of what may be your biggest crash. I don't know if you're allowed to talk about it though. I'm not going to name a team name, but if I remember correctly, you did test a car, an F1600 at Road Atlanta.
Yes, I did.
And you lost the brakes.
That's the scariest crash. That is the scariest crash.
Let's talk about that if you don't mind. Road
Before we get into this, you mean to tell me that your 2 biggest crashes were both on test days?
Yeah. Yeah, they were. I actually never had. I never had any big crashes on race days. I've never.
Sounds about
I
right.
had one that was. Yeah, and I had one where I tried to I tried to take a piece of Watkins Glen's guardrail with the rear end of my car, but that didn't hurt, and there wasn't that much damage. It just looked really bad. But the scariest crash I ever had. And it wasn't necessarily a crash because I didn't hit anything, but I tore up a lot of stuff because pea gravel sucks, especially at Road Atlanta. But I was driving an F1600 car, and this happened on 3 separate occasions. But I had total brake failure on 3 different sessions that weekend. And one of them was going into turn 7, or not turn 7, turn 6. It's the first right-hander before the tight one that leads you onto the back straightaway. And I was going in there, and I went to tap the brakes, and I had no brakes at all. And I'm 4th gear, went into there about 100 miles an hour, and the only thing I could think to do, because the way that corner is it's banked, so you're going to skip half the pea gravel before you hit the wall.
Yeah.
So I tried to slow it down as quickly as I could, and I looped the car, and then I was like, oh, that was stupid, because now I'm going into pea gravel sideways. Now I'm definitely going to flip it.
Yeah.
But I went into I ended up not flipping it, and I was very lucky not to, but I went into the gravel so fast that the gravel broke off both of my mirrors.
Dang.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
And then another scenario, I was going down the back straightaway, the long back straightaway, top speed at that track, and lost it going into 10A. I lost my brakes going into 10A, and that was scary because I made it all the way to the top of the hill before I was able to slow it down enough to stop it from hitting the wall. But I didn't wreck the car either times, but those were the 2 like scariest moments where I was like, holy crap, that could have been
that's pretty
really
gnarly,
bad.
dude.
The fact that you lost brakes. Yeah. The fact that you lost brakes twice. I mean, losing brakes for any race car driver is the most scariest thing ever. I don't care who you are.
Has to be so.
Yeah, you're out of control. It's terrifying.
To have no ability to stop whatsoever at the speeds you could be going, it's the scariest thing ever.
Yeah.
So
it was not fun.
Not to throw any teams under the bus and not to name any names, but these were with the same team.
It's better if we
right?
don't.
I was with the same team.
Yeah. So those 2 were with the same team, and then I had another incident with another team in 10A and 10B that was not quite as scary. There's actually a video of that on my Facebook of me, but we had a relay failure, and the mechanic forgot to pull the relay out of the car, and the relay got wedged behind the brake pedal, and it was raining, and it was right at the start of an F1600 Pro race, and we go into 10A and 10B, and I hit the brakes, and like it's firm, but it's too firm, and nothing was happening. So I just kept smashing and smashing, and then I felt something break, and then it finally broke. But in the meantime, you have all these cars just flying by, spinning, and I'm like, holy crap. But yeah, I've had a few too many scares with the brakes. It's almost to the point where I prefer to build my own brakes or service my own when I'm at the track, because I know how to do most of that stuff, and I'm kind of terrified of the repercussions of leaving it to somebody else.
Yeah, that's fair.
That's understandable.
Yeah.
So let's jump into bent axles and broken hearts.
So we're going from Ryan Bjerke's experience of crashing to NASCAR experience of crashing.
Yes. So
Yep.
Daytona 500 was last weekend, Speed Week, I guess you could say now.
Yeah.
Obviously, the potential to crash a lot of cars is very high because you had 4 different series racing on the oval at Daytona. Let's highlight 2 different bent axle broken heart scenarios. One is a bent axle, the other is a broken heart. First off, Xfinity race Saturday night. Mike Snyder went for a horrifying ride. Thankfully, he was okay.
Crazy.
The car was not. There was nothing left of that car. It was really just the safety cell. Terrifying. And then the second one, Harrison Burton, another flip. Actually had a great speed week. Like his speed week was looking to be similar to what Trevor Baynes was in 2011 when Trevor won it.
With the same car.
Same team, same car number, and everything. And great speed week, another rookie. It was his second start, just like Trevor Bayne, and he was running well all week. And I think it was Brad Keselowski caused one of probably 7 wrecks that he caused on Sunday, and took out Harrison Burton, and he ended up going flipping. But guys, let's talk about that for a second. 2 flips, 2 days, kind of crazy.
Yeah, I kind of want to touch on Harrison Burton really quick because I feel like we're going to talk a lot more about Mike Snyder here in a little bit due to how big that wreck was. But leading up to the 500, you mentioned it with Harrison Burton, it was almost a mirror image of Trevor Baynes' 500 experience. The fact that he didn't qualify well, had the duels go almost the exact same way. The fact that he was the same age, same car, same team, basically the exact same scenario all the way up to the 500, and to get turned on the back straightaway and go into a flip in his first Cup race, I would say.
Second Cup race, excuse me. But to have it end the way it did, coming to the end of stage 1, it sucks, honestly. And he was running very well too, right up with the rest of the Fords up at the front. I think he definitely, towards the end of this race, if he was around for the end of it, would have been a contender or a challenger for the 500 win. That's the unfortunate part of plate racing. You know, as highly prestigious as Daytona is, it's also highly unpredictable. A lot of it is not in your hands. You know, like as racers, we think of some of our favorite racetracks are tracks that we are in control. Where, you know, if we're good at it, it's because, you know, we're able to do what we need to do. And Daytona, I mean, it does take some skill to be, you know, to work the draft, to work the lanes, and, you know, side draft and all that stuff. But a lot of it is out of your control because it heavily relies on what other people around you are doing. So, you know, as a driver, I would assume that's probably pretty terrifying knowing some of the guys that are out there with you.
I'm gonna tie off of what Jordan said, and this can kind of go in a couple different ways, conversation-wise. But as far as stage racing and the wreck that took out Harrison Burton go together, I feel like the stages kind of made some drivers just get antsy and start pushing and making wrong moves for no reason. You know, it's a 500-mile race, and you got Keselowski taking out 8-7 of the best cars at the end of stage 1. It's just kind of like, as a person that knows racing really well, you look at that, you're like, that's just like, shouldn't be like that, you know? Because you had some heavy hitters taken out in that wreck, and I know, you know, they have the stages implemented to make it better for the viewers. It's definitely better for the fans, but I think they should kind of look into that, at least for maybe the plate races, because I feel like that definitely caused some things and accidents that normally would not have happened if it was just a green flag and a checkered flag and no stages. Something to think about for sure.
it's a game. It's a game of devil's advocate because you kind of see it the same way in the duels. Was Joey Logano. He was obviously in the lead in his duel, and then you had Chris Buescher go to the inside, get a run on him. He didn't have to block. He could have, if he didn't block, he would have been fine. But it's a chance to start in the second row of the Daytona 500 versus maybe starting eighth. But then again, it's not for the 500. It's just for qualifying positions, and you're trying to improve your position as much as you can. But in the end, he put himself in the wall and ended up having to start in the 30th spot or like in 35th or something like that. But you're playing the same card in stage racing to where you're going for points, and these points go towards the end of the season. And if you're trying to go for like a playoff point here and there, yeah, you want to try to be up at the front to win the stage to get that playoff point. But at the same time, if you're not inside the top 10, you're not going to, risk everything on the line just to get points because you still got 120 miles left of racing to go.
I think
It's a fair
I do
assessment.
agree with you, Jordan. I just think the one problem I saw personally from the Daytona 500 last Sunday was, it seemed like you got the top 15 all in line, and they're making moves, but they're being cautious with it. And then you got, Brad Keselowski, new team owner, new sponsor. He did well. He won one of the duels. He's got the confidence underneath him, and he just starts making some wild moves at the end of each stage. And what do you wreck? Like 21 cars by the end of the day or something like that. So
something like that.
He took out eight in the first. He took out eight in the first one and got four of the Toyotas.
Yeah,
that hurts my soul. I worked for those guys.
Driver. He's one of my favorite drivers. But I mean, at the end of that race, I was like, dude, you just lost some fans for sure.
Well, I think some of that has to do with the new car. I don't think they really know what they can do in terms of drafting, bump drafting. Because you think about it, the supply shortage, not only of cars but just parts in general. I'm sure that was on the minds of a lot of people coming into this race. Because I feel like for the most part, until the end of the race, we saw a relatively tame race. Aside from the crash at the end of the stage. It was pretty tame. You'd have your instances, but it seemed like it almost kind of seemed like a throwback to the old style of play racing, where it was kind of methodical. You'd have your moments, but for the most part, everybody was behaved. And then the end of the race, that's when they turned it up. That's kind of how it seemed for this. But to kind of circle back on what I was going to say was, I think some of the issues we saw with bump drafting with Keselowski and also a few other drivers was not really knowing what they could do. The bumpers, while they seemed to line up, they weren't really square. Especially the rear bumper has a lot of curvature to it. So I could see where it'd be really easy to get a driver out of shape and spin them out.
And I want to point out one more thing too, is right before the Harrison Burton crash happened, you could see maybe 2 or 3 laps before Burton's car was not handling the way he probably wanted to, without a doubt. I mean, you could see off of turn 2 and off of turn 4, he was just getting sideways and loose. I don't know if it was between the airflow of the cars on the inside or if it was the pushes that Brad was giving him, but you could just tell that Harrison was having to catch the car numerous amount of times coming out of turns 2 and 4 because the car was just getting sideways on him on the exits.
I gotta say, that is one thing that this new car has really made me excited about for NASCAR, is the fact that it is hard to drive. It's even hard to drive on super speedways. Like, yeah, they've got a lot of grip. They've got more downforce now. But that car, everybody was struggling at some point during that race. And that's what I think is really cool. It's kind of like back in the old days. Like, Bill Elliott couldn't drive his car the same way at the beginning of the run as he could at the end of the run at Daytona. But that was the last generation of NASCAR. It was pretty much the same. It was just like, oh, I need new tires because I'm courting this set kind of deal.
Yeah.
Not because the car handled poorly. I'm gonna blow a tire if I don't.
I think another cool storyline that we could have seen, with maybe without a couple cautions and without the stages, was kind of how the duels played out. It was like an older style of racing. You had like a 6-car breakaway, then like a pack of 9, pack of 5. It was kind of more split up. Which was honestly cool to see. We haven't seen that for a long time. It's really just been massive pack racing. But with all the cautions, it was just kind of how it's always been. But that definitely would have been cool to see.
Agree.
I think it was wild that we had as many lapped cars as we did in the duels. And I mean, like you said, Jed, they got spread out. But like in the duels and on Sunday, I mean, it seemed like it was very hard if you were the last car in the draft. It seemed like it was very hard to stay in the draft. Like if you had any sort of, it could just be something random that it'd be easy for you to lose the draft, and you're just waiting to get lapped at that point. But uh, it seemed like towards the end of the 500, there was a lot of like groups of 2, 3. Some were damaged, but some weren't. Guys that just lost the draft, and they were getting lapped.
All right, let's kind of tie into our next subject, which was wings and things, and this is bringing up the last lap crash in the Xfinity race, which did happen to have Maya Snyder go up into the catch fence rear end first, thankfully, but still tore the whole rear end of the car, tore the engine off, and I think if you watch one of the replays closely, the engine dismounted from the car before the car even hit the ground, and whoever was behind him, you couldn't tell who it was. Matt Mills.
Matt
okay,
Mills,
I couldn't tell
car.
with the smoke.
Yeah.
Smoke, but Matt Mills just completely destroyed his engine with the front of his car.
He's very lucky that he did not take that engine to the windshield, because that
yes,
he hit that
Could have
engine
had
as
JD
it bounced.
McDuffie.
Yeah, he hit that engine as it bounced off the pavement and drop kicked it, dude. Like,
yeah.
I will say, we've gotten really lucky with some wrecks in the past few years at Daytona. Whether it be cars going into the catch fence and the driver be okay, cars going into the catch fence and debris end up in the grandstands, a car going into the fence and the potential that as they come back down, they could get hit head on. Ryan Newman 2020. There are so many things that could go wrong in an instance like that. I've seen so many different things on social media about ideas that people have. Some of it, people are just talking out their rear end. But other things, like I saw something, somebody suggested, what if they raised the wall to, if they doubled the height of it? So instead of, if you get airborne, the likelihood of you going to the catch fence is severely less because you're hitting the safer barrier instead of the catch fence, which I think is a better alternative. I don't know how effective that would be, but it's just, you see these things and it's like, you feel bad for the drivers because at some point somebody's not going to get lucky. Ryan Newman is probably the luckiest guy to be alive right now. I hate to put it like that, but it's going to get to the point, regardless of how safe the car is, that cars always find new ways to crash, and it's going to get to that point at some point.
Yeah, I think touching on this point too, you're looking at there. I like the idea of raising the wall. The only counterproductive, or I should say, the counterpart to that is when fans in the stands, if the cars are running the high line at Daytona or Talladega, if they come by the stripe or come in front of the fans, you won't be able to see them come by. You just won't because the cars are just so small and low to the ground, and the wall would just block the view. But if we're talking in the rules of safety, that shouldn't really matter to the fans' perspective because you're saving yourself just in case a car does get turned around and gets up in the air. You'd rather have a wall in between you that's going to stop the car than safety protecting fencing that if the car gets into it, debris is going to go flying everywhere and into the stands. I mean, we've seen people injured at Daytona twice with, Austin Dillon's crash, Kyle Larson's crash. We've seen people at Talladega injured with Carl Edwards' crash back in 2009. And hell, Michael Jordan was on the back straightaway with Bubba Wallace, and a piece of the control arm was in the grill of Michael Jordan's hauler.
Well, not only that, but the truck arm from Snyder's car bounced off the track and up underneath J.J. Yaley's car. And it went up through the deck lid, literally bounced off the track and went through the deck lid and stuck, because there's a picture of it on Twitter somewhere of the truck arm sticking up out of the deck lid. Just crazy. Like, so many flying parts. Like, we're honestly lucky that crash didn't happen in trial, because that could have, somebody for sure would have been hit. But yeah, it's just crazy. And I remember years ago, back when Austin had his crash in a trial, that there was, thoughts of how do we find a way to replace the catch fence? Because clearly that, while it is effective in keeping cars on, out of the grandstands, how long can we go without a really bad accident happening? And one idea I saw was a plexiglass protective wall. I don't know how that would work, how strong that would have to be. That would be a lot of material. Also, how would it be viewing wise for the fans? How would that reflect light? So many different things. I don't know if that's an effective replacement. I don't ever see that happen.
I actually saw a pretty promising design on Twitter, where basically, if you look at all the accidents, the biggest problem in them all is the car or a part of the car hitting the actual pole to the catch fence. So I saw a design where it was basically just the wall and then chain link fence. I guess you could just make one giant piece that loops around the entire track. And then they had the poles that held up the fence about like 5 to 10 yards back. So I guess their idea would be if the car went airborne and into the fence, it would hit the fence and hopefully go back onto the track. Or, I mean, it would still be bad. But if we could stop the cars from hitting the poles, I think that's the most dangerous part. And if you look at Daytona in the past 10 years, it's just a ticking time bomb. So something bad happens. So.
For sure,
it's been a ticking time bomb for IndyCar, and the bomb went off in 2011, and that's what took Weldon. To be honest, the only thing I can say is put the fans on the infield and take them. It's getting to a point where the cars are getting so fast, but they're so freaking heavy that a catch fence isn't going to be able to stop it. And and like plexiglass. That may work, but I don't. It may work for like a motorcycle, but I don't think it would work for a car. Certainly not a NASCAR. But the chain link thing would be a great idea. But the problem is now you're waiting every time a car goes up into the catch fence. You're now waiting an hour because they'd have to repair. They have to repair everything around it and make sure it's taunting all the other areas on track.
Because we've seen that with Pocono IndyCar when Robert Wickens had his crash. Sebastian Bourdais and a few other drivers were very critical of how bad the repair job was. Some guys really didn't want to go out there after that crash. I mean, for several reasons, obviously, but a lot of it was because of the way they repaired the fence. Obviously, Wickens had his crash, so the potential clearly it was potential to happen. So you see the way they repaired that fence, and it's like, man, you don't want to go back out there again because a wreck just like that could happen again. What I do like about the current design is that the fence poles are so frequent that a car would probably catch it before it would go through it because of how fast they're going. So I do like the current design for that because, like you said, it took his car from 200 to a complete stop, and really it's just those fence poles catching it. I think he ripped a few of them up, and he got very lucky because by the time his car bounced back onto the racetrack, pretty much the entire pack had gone by until Keselowski spun and clipped him. But the majority of the pack was gone. It had the potential to be pretty nasty beyond that, though, if he would have bounced back in front of other cars. I want to say maybe he did a few for Hattori in Xfinity, like a few one-offs, because I know Hattori has dabbled in Xfinity and he's driven for Hattori before this year. But yeah, first full season, so first win, first outing for RCR. That's pretty awesome. I want to kind of throw a little nugget out there. When he first came to Hattori, HRE, the 16 truck, 2019 Daytona, he won that race. Comes to RCR, first full Xfinity season, wins the first race. Pretty awesome. He wasn't a Truck Series champion, but like they had kind of like they never really put a full season together to win a championship, but he would have runs where he would be up front, consecutively for several races. Racing for a team like RCR where they've won championships in Xfinity, he's got a good teammate too, Sheldon Creed. So yeah, Austin Hill. I would say he's probably a dark horse for the championship, just based on kind of how he's ran.
Agreed.
Yeah. Yeah, Jordan gets to go racing this weekend. So for those of you that don't know, Jordan is one of the drivers for Pabst Racing in Indy Pro 2000. Jordan's obviously ran FR Americas the last couple years, has had some podiums, and is now moving to Indy Pro 2000 after running a weekend with Pabst at Mid Ohio, and is now contesting the full season for Pabst this season in Indy Pro. First outing at St. Pete this weekend. How do you feel about it? Solid. 26, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think they got the full racing. I think
I don't think they did either.
Yeah, they had a few full course yellows, and they had Grant told us this last week when he was on the show. They had 14 of 26
Yeah,
cars.
I was there. I watched that race,
The race.
and it was just a complete disaster. There was 6 taken out on the first lap, and then they basically just ran under caution for 45 minutes or 40 minutes, whatever the time limit is.
Minimum. When the year that COVID hit, 2020? Yeah, 2020.
Jordan was there.
Huh?
Jordan was there. St. Pete.
So I was there when they reran it in October. I was working for D-Force at the time, and I remember watching Juven just take flight and lawn dart Rasmussen at the end of the straightaway. That's inevitable at that place, and it's been 3 years in a row now, because before then it was can't remember the driver's name, but he drove for Arms Up. But the year before that, they had a driver flip, and then they had Juven go tumbling, and then they had D'Orlando, not D'Orlando.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was.
Yeah, no, it
Last
was
year?
D'Orlando. Yeah, yeah, it was D'Orlando tumble, and of all the places, especially, and this is from I've worked with a lot of young race car drivers, and you're having so many kids, and I think it's only going to get worse if you put the USF junior guys start running there, but you put these young kids who have very minimal, and it's supposed to be a starting point for cars. You're having all these young kids hop in, and their first race is going to be a freaking a freaking street course. Like, and it's dumb. You're not giving them the chance to have an air. And it you're putting a lack of confidence in a lot of kids, and generally the guys who do really well at St. Petersburg their first year are kids who have racing experience before. Like Braden Eves did 5 races in the F1600 championship the year prior before he went to USF. He had car experience before he went and raced St. Petersburg. I don't think St. Petersburg should be the place where Road to Indy debuts. I get it, it's cool, it's a street race. There's a lot of you're out there, but it's not the place for new guys to learn how to drive a street course, especially when they're still learning a car.
Yeah. Well, the crazy part about this is that last year was actually the second race of the year because we started the season out at Barber, actually. So to see that actually happen and see, the amount of carnage still continue to increase, I think kind of tells us tale that we need a couple more races in the cars before they go to a race like St. Petersburg. But granted, if you're going to go to a street course, St. Petersburg is a better track than it is at Toronto because it's a little bit more spacious, and whereas Toronto's a lot tighter.
But at what point do you just say maybe we shouldn't have those young guys running on street courses? Like, I understand it's part of the development process because they're going to be running on it once they get to IndyCar. But use Indy Pro as that example for it because at least they have car experience by that point. And they're racing against the same guys. I mean, when you go through that ladder, you're racing against the same guys you raced against last year. You're going to already know what they're going to do. You're going to know if they're a jerk. You're going to know if they're a good guy, if they're going to give you the room, or if they're going to chop your nose off. I just don't feel like it's the place that USF juniors should never go there. Shouldn't go to any street races, in my opinion. If they have it's similar racing at all to what F4 was, there's no point. They're not going to get any laps in because IndyCar's not going to give up their track time for a support series. And so if you want the kids to actually learn, number one, I think they need to increase the minimum test days for USF and USF juniors, and they need to not do street courses. It's just not a good mix for them.
Well, and then if you increase the minimum test days, then it's more expensive, and Road to Indy is currently very expensive anyways. So
once you're already spending 370 grand to be in a car, what's an extra 10 to give you an extra day of testing?
Yeah, but
I will say, it's much better to be
20 becomes 40, and I have a strong feeling of at least that aspect of it because it's increasingly becoming expensive. Now we had USF juniors. You've got one more series you've got to go through where you spend at least 1 year in, and that's already $200,000 at least probably to run USF juniors. Then you throw in USF 2000, Indy Pro 2000, Indy Lights if you make it there. I mean, you're talking millions of dollars to go through the Road to Indy. Not many people can bring that kind of money. So,
sure. I will say though, as a racer, I would rather spend $30,000 to go testing than to spend $30,000 repairing my car from a crash at St. Petersburg.
I 100% agree. Because St. Petersburg's a place where you could do nothing wrong and still walk out with the totaled car. That's just the nature of that place. Like Kent Vancaro last year got put into the wall and almost got his head taken off.
Yeah,
Kent didn't really do anything wrong in that wreck. he just was happenstance on the outside and got tossed up in the air and it rode off a car.
Yeah,
and that's not what you should. especially having it be one of the first races of the year. I don't feel like it. There's a necessity for
All
it,
right.
if I'm honest.
I agree with that. And USF grew so much over last year. Now, obviously, you throw in the halo this year, car count goes down. But last year, where it grew to 26 or 28 cars at one point, and you throw 26 cars into a bull ring like St. Pete, you really going to tell me something bad's not going to happen at some point? And look, there's some really talented drivers in the road to Indy. However, and experience plays into it. It's a very difficult track, and sometimes you get conflicting personalities, conflicting driving styles. You're gonna have that. So I agree. Maybe they shouldn't have street races for USF.
I've got a lot of seat time in cars. If I got asked to go drive St. Petersburg this weekend right now, I tell them no. And it's hard for a driver to say that, but it is not worth putting the rest of my season at risk for one race where the chances of riding off a car and spending all that extra amount of money, it's not worth it. It's just not worth it. And it like for somebody like me who I don't bring money to the table when I go and drive. I bring my engineering knowledge and that's about it. I don't have much to bring to the table other than that. I can't. I would cripple my family if I took a $50,000 damage from St. Petersburg. That my family wouldn't be able to pay that off.
And then I'm gonna actually lead it into a question for Jordan based off of something that happened last year. But obviously the St. Pete Grand Prix.
Yep.
That's my home race. I only live 10 minutes from the track, and I've literally been there all 3 days, all 4 days. I go on Thursdays too. For as long as I've lived in St. Pete, so about 18 years now, I've probably seen every single USF, Pro Mazda, you name it, race. And I do have to agree with all of you. It's pretty ruthless to start your road to Indy career on literally a bull ring. It's about as tight and as sketchy as it can get. But at the same time, it is road to Indy. Like if you're in road to Indy, you have to be prepared to be an IndyCar in 3 years. If the opportunity did come up. Now, obviously, that's pretty unrealistic unless you're insanely good and have the money to do so. But I noticed last year, the first USF 2000 race, it was just an absolute crapshoot to who was up front, and Evan got taken out in the first corner, and I knew I had a bad feeling about the race, but if he had just kept clean that first corner, he would have finished like 13th or something in his first USF start because there was that many wrecks.
Yeah.
And I remember he told me, he's like, yeah, dude, like for some reason, all the teams are just super tough about being right up on the gearbox of the car in front of you. And for the first race of later on in the season, it makes sense. You want to be as aggressive as possible. But for the first race of the season, this is kind of where I'm going to lead it into you, Jordan. What would be the necessary, like, what are they going for there? Because as far as the first lap at St. Pete in any Road to Indy series, it's always just insane. So I don't really see what stacking everybody up on the start is good for, Yeah.
It's tough to pass. It's clear and simple. It's tough to pass at a place like St. Pete. And unless you're like an Oliver Askew or Rinus VeeKay who can mow their way through the field, you're likely only going to be able to pass in the first couple of corners at St. Pete. Because after that, it's basically single file racing. And the way the airport straightaway is, it's wide enough to where you can go 5 wide into the corner. So if you got a guy dive bombing on the inside or a guy trying to roll the outside, everyone's either going to mesh up to the middle or everyone's going to get pushed wide on the exit. So it's kind of like you need to pick that fine line, but you need to be in that position in order to make it happen. Like looking at some other onboard videos, people who take it cautious just get eaten up under their brakes and lose maybe like 5 or 6 spots just under braking. But if you're able to keep your nose clean, you gain those 5 or 6 spots back just because of other people's misfortune. So yeah, it's kind of like a catch-22 in this case, to where if the race goes green and you're able to be aggressive on the start and make up positions, it's good for you. But if there's a lot of people who are going to be taking each other out, then there's really I just
know if I ever got the chance to race USF 2000 and my first race was St. Pete, I would much rather finish dead last by 10 seconds and have a car intact than just get destroyed turn one. That's just me. I've seen a lot of racing there, so I know how it goes. But I know once you get to that point, you got the sponsors and the team. It's not that laid back. You got to be on go mode, which makes sense. You're trying to move up the ladder. You got to get your name out there. So it's definitely a catch-22, like you said.
It's Rob Howden's famous last words to any young racer going to St. Pete for the first time. Leave St. Pete with a perfect car. Don't leave with a bent car loading it up on the truck on dollies. All right, let's go ahead and go into our new segment on the show, which is going to be called Send It or Pull the Reins. This is kind of like a hot take segment to where we kind of list a question here, and we go around the room basically saying, what's your take on it? So we're going to start off with Jed here. I'm going to throw it over to you first. Send it or pull the reins. Should NASCAR get rid of the no bumping lock rule in Xfinity and the Truck Series?
Just straight up, no, I don't think so. I mean, that's just, yeah.
Pull the reins on it, huh? Zach, go. Mike's muted.
I knew that would happen at some point. Pull the reins. Because at some point, I mean, think of Saturday night. Great example. Usually you don't see bump drafting as an issue in Xfinity, but Saturday night was proof that rule is very effective. Now, one issue is how it's enforced, because it's very inconsistent how they enforce it. You see more of an issue in truck racing than you do in Xfinity. However, yeah, pull the reins for sure.
Ryan?
Pull the reins. I was a driver in karting where I'd rip your bumper off, I'd bump you so hard. But it doesn't mean it was right. Like when I'm old enough to remember back in the days where we didn't have the full width rear bumper. Nobody bumped back then, and that your choice, if you bumped wrong, you were the one flipping over. You weren't going to screw the guy in front of you. I think you pull the reins on it because the chances of something going wrong are so high. Mm-hmm. And it's just not worth it when it comes. It's just not worth all the damage. I don't know. I think you're going to get somebody hurt if you let loose of that rule. So.
Yeah, I agree with all you. It's pulling the reins on this one only because the factor of a huge wreck happening and the amount of aggression is, especially in the development series like the Truck and Xfinity series, it's much greater. I mean, the Cup guys even have a little bit of a trouble with it at the top level in NASCAR. And when you see, the Truck and Xfinity guys try to do it, the chance of a wreck is going to be higher. The only thing I had to say, though, and I wish NASCAR is just a little bit more consistent on it, is when it's towards the end of a race, they enforce the rule a little bit more. Because you saw at the end of the Xfinity race and even at the end of the truck race, it's basically once you get down to NASCAR overtime or 2 or 3 to go, that rule of no bump drafting is basically gone out the window.
They don't enforce it very well.
And you see this, like even IMSA's MX5 Cup, they're very strict, or they say they're very strict about it. The Daytona race, I don't recall anybody getting black flagged for that. And those are, that was like super speedway racing in NASCAR, but on the Daytona road course with MX5 cars. You didn't really see them enforce the rule much. It's a very ball and strike kind of rule. So it's hard to enforce, but I get why they have it.
Yeah. All right. Next section is send it or pull the reins. Was Brad Keselowski driving too aggressively throughout the course of the Daytona 500? Ryan, I'll throw it to you first.
I like the aggression, but it was a little much. And he definitely put the Paul Tracy chrome horn to a whole new meaning in that race. And I don't know. He caused a lot of big wrecks. I can't really be on his side for that, even though he like Jed, he's one of my favorite drivers. He has been in the series for a while, so I don't know. I think he needs to not be so aggressive.
Pull the
Zach,
reins.
Go to you.
Pull the reins, 100%. Especially the stage 1 wreck. It was just too early. It would have been one thing if it was at the end of the race, but he caused a pretty big wreck that took out a lot of good cars early on, and then he did it a few other times throughout the race. And in fact, I think it was the last wreck that took out Stenhouse. It also took out one of his own cars. Brad Keselowski being an owner driver. took out Chris Buescher. Chris Buescher won his dual race. Chris Buescher clearly had a very good car, had a very good chance at winning. You cause a wreck that takes out your own team car. That's kind of a bozo move. You could almost win Bozo of the Week with that move. Yeah, pull the reins, 100%.
Are we sure he didn't?
We'll save that one for Nick Sanchez, ARCA driver. Love Nick Sanchez, but 3 wide coming to the start of a race, that's Bozo of the Week, 100%.
Yeah, I mean, Ryan and Zach are spot on.
Jed, over to you.
Brad's getting absolutely obliterated on Twitter right now. So yeah, he definitely was way too aggressive for a 500-mile race. Took out a lot of good cars, made some questionable moves. You know, if it's 50 laps to go, I don't think anyone even mentions it. But you know, at the end of stage 1, to take out, like I was saying earlier in the pod, he took out 6 really heavy big hitters. So he's got to clean that up for next year for sure.
I'm going to pull the reins on this one, but I have to give Brad Keselowski a little bit of the benefit of the doubt. Ryan mentioned it too. I love the aggression that he has. And granted, it's a new car. This was the first time they got into like a huge patch to test the bunk drafting out. And, you know, Brad even mentioned it in the radio communication after he turned Harrison, is that he had no idea, you know, pushing him in that set was going to turn Harrison Burton down into William Byron and Kyle Busch. And then the same thing that happened to Ricky Stenhouse, that I think was a little bit over aggressive in that case. And then towards the end of the race, I get you're coming to the end, but you're not going for the win. You don't have the momentum. He puts Chase Briscoe into the wall, who had a huge momentum. It basically took Brad Keselowski out, potentially getting a top 3 finish. But it promotes Chase Briscoe to a top 5. Yeah, Briscoe had a huge run from Kyle Busch on the outside. If Cindric didn't push Blaney to the wall, Briscoe probably has a shot to win the whole race.
Yeah, that's right.
But because he pushed him into the wall, it ruined Briscoe's chance of winning.
Man, he had a lot of dumb moves yesterday.
Are you sure he didn't win Bozo of the Week? He did wreck out his own.
I might change my opinion on that.
You might change your opinion.
Nick Sanchez, I'm sorry, man. Yeah, Keselowski, 100%. You know, and to touch on that real quick before we move on, I've seen a nickname for Keselowski resurface that I haven't seen in years on social media. People are going back to calling him Horseface now. I haven't seen in years. That was his nickname, when he was
driving the 12
when he won
car.
the title.
Yeah.
No, when he won the title in 2012.
Yeah, that was his nickname back then. Like when Twitter was just an infant, you didn't really see people get roasted on Twitter much. Now it's all the time. But yeah,
that's pretty ruthless.
That's
man.
pretty bad if they rehash that.
That's bad.
Speaking of Brad Keselowski at Twitter, 10-year anniversary of NASCAR going live on Twitter because of Keselowski on the back straightaway.
Yeah.
So to add that for a little tidbit.
First and only live tweet, I think.
Yeah, right.
That we know of.
Final question: was the Super Speedway package NASCAR brought good enough? Did we like the Super Speedway package? Send or pull the reins. Zach, I'll start with you.
Send it, dude. I liked the balance of it. You were able to lock on and push people if you needed to. We actually saw a little bit of tandeming, which we saw that a little bit with the Gen 6. We definitely saw it with the COT. But I like the balance. It had the pack racing aspect. It wasn't so easy that you could stay in the draft. Like you saw guys lose the draft, but it was easy enough that if you got locked on with somebody, you could go somewhere. And also, it was hard to drive. Handling mattered. It wasn't just who was left at the end of the race, who survived. It was kind of like it seemed like a nostalgic super speedway race. So I was 100% send it.
Ryan?
I like that it's back to the old days where it's even hard to drive on a super speedway. You're taking tires not because the tire's going to blow up. You're taking it because it's hard to drive. And that's something we've missed for a long, long time in NASCAR. And I think I'm not a huge NASCAR fan. I haven't really been since Montoya left because he's my all-time favorite driver. But he bringing back the ability to have the car be difficult to drive even on super speedways is making me a bit more of a fan because I'm a fan of the racing. I'm not a fan of the look of the car. I'm not a fan of stages, but I'm a fan of racing. and it's really bringing a whole new perspective to NASCAR that they lost when they started going to the spec cars. And the last time you really saw cars that would handle differently throughout the race was it was like in the early 90s. It was kind of like that in the early 2000s, but a car that truly did not handle well at the end of a stint was in the 90s, and it's cool to see it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm right there with what Ryan's saying. It was cool to see the old school style of racing brought back. Seems like the drivers were definitely up on top of the wheel throughout the entire race. Pushing was a little touch and go. I don't know if changing the bodywork to make it a little more flush as far as pushing would help the cars at all. But besides that, I really liked it. And I think a couple less cautions and maybe without the stages, we would have seen some super old style kind of NASCAR racing like we saw in the duels with like a 6-7 car breakaway for the win of Daytona 500, which would be pretty neat.
Yeah, I'm definitely for sending on this one. It kind of gave you a mix of a 2004 draft package as well as a 2012 draft package, which I think was probably one of the better draft packages out there, because not only does the pack stay together in 2012, but you had the ability to tandem draft with someone to go up towards the front and make a move and make an effort to get towards the front. But you didn't have the obvious disadvantage of overheating issues. But in this case, it was kind of like that happy medium in that aspect, to where the cars are tough to drive. You're able to kind of tandem up towards the front, because we saw that with Kyle Busch and Bubba Wallace towards the end when they made their push up towards the front. And I think it just gives the drivers a little bit more versatility to make their way through the field. We saw towards the end on how quick the closing rate is on the cars, but they don't get their momentum stalled out. It's not a huge air bubble that they're pushing the guy in front. They're actually able to draft up to the guys and make a move to the inside and slingshot past the guy, which is what I think all the fans want to see, because it allows anybody a shot to win the race.
Spot on. I don't think we disagreed at all.
Yeah, we were all the same thing. We all thought
actually
the same
pretty
thing.
Impressive.
All right, now let's go ahead and get into the main show topics of this episode, which is, we're going to start off with a quick tidbit topic, off topic a little bit, but it's huge in the racing news. It deals with Formula One, because we're just a month away from the Formula One season starting, and that is a new person at the helm in the race director position in the FIA, as Michael Massey has now been replaced by Eduardo Fritz and Niels Wittich. Guys, any thoughts?
About time. I don't think you're going to have any disagreement with that one. They just need some consistency up there. They need to enforce their rules. The rules need to be much more clear. You don't need the teams getting involved and, the team principals wagering with race control during races. It just needs to be, you call it how it is and you stick to it. You set a precedent and you're consistent with it throughout.
From my race, as Zach knows, I was the race director for Gateway's club races the last 2 years, and the best philosophy with race directing, which thank God I'm not doing that anymore. I hate race directing; it is terrifying. But you just have it. Like, the problem was Massey was trying to make somebody happy every time, and you just have to accept that your role is not to make anybody happy. You're gonna be the asshole, and that, excuse my French, but that's just the nature of the job. You have to be the one to put the foot down. You have to get in the face of them, and he got into the face of Toto at the last race of the season. Granted, like, I didn't want Lewis to win, but like, he didn't. That wasn't the time, nor did he really have a leg to stand on when he did it. Like, he waited until the last race under a crappy call that he called. So I don't know. I think it's a good thing he's gone. And from what it sounds like, the guy who's coming over from WEC seems to be a real hard about it. So I like it.
I think in this case, it's interesting because not only are you just putting now the race solely in one person's hands, you're now putting in a little tight group of people. Now there's 2 race directors and a senior vice chairperson who's going to be overseeing everything that happens. So now there's like a little collaborative effort. You have your collaborative effort, obviously, with the stewards, but now you have like a little collaborative effort among the race director who calls the shots for the race. So I think, in my perspective, this is honestly a better move because now you don't just put the whole race solely in one person's hands. You now put it in a group's hands.
Well, one thing I really like about it is bringing Stewart over from WEC because it really seems like, whether it be WEC or IMSA, while it is heads up, elbows out racing, there's still etiquette. They don't take crappy driving. They don't take this sketchy kind of I don't know, some of the stuff I saw in F1 this past year. If somebody did that to me in a go-kart race, I'd be throwing hands.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I'd like the idea that you have somebody that's not going to play the stupid games, and they're gonna call a race out they should.
Almost getting into it with Kretschel.
Hey, hold on a second. Kretschel and I are good after that.
I know.
We're
I just
good.
had to bring it up because it was funny.
Dude,
He apologized He apologized immediately for it too.
Yeah,
It was
dude,
it was a
my
good scenario.
face was as red as my shirt, dude. It was hilarious. I mean, I didn't think it was funny at the time, but I was. I didn't even want to talk to Ryan.
I'm sorry. I was laughing my butt off when that happened because I was like, I know Matt knows what he did was wrong.
Yeah, I don't even know what you are talking about.
Here.
Okay, so it's the super track at Gateway last year.
It's the best layout in my opinion that we ran at Gateway.
So this was before I got a new kart. So like, I had kind of struggled at the end with my older kart. It just kind of had this numb feeling. It had been flexed out.
Wasn't it bent
tweaked
too?
several times, and basically. It was bad. It was pretty bad.
There was nothing normal about that thing. It was awful.
I'll be honest, and I hate to use it as an excuse because my mind, I just drive it. It had like no feeling at all. I was just wrestling it because you couldn't really feel what was going on. It was great for Super Track though, because Super Track you just drive the ever living crap out of it, and it's fast as long as you got draft and you are kind of smooth. But I mean, you could really wrestle the kart around, and I liked that. And I was having a good day. I was running like fourth, I think. And
yeah, you were. I think you had just. I think you had gotten
just got passed.
Oh yeah, you just got passed.
I was somewhere in the top 5, and top 5, top 6. We were all pretty close, and I just got passed. We're coming back into the Kartplex section, into the hairpin, and Matt makes a move on me, and I started turning in before I saw him. So I was committing to the corner just because I thought it was mine. I didn't know that there was anybody there. And
it was yours.
He nerfed me, and then I spun backwards. And the crazy part about this is we, like the top 11, it was basically the top half of the field had drove away in a few laps from like the back half. I don't know if there's a wreck or something, but like basically
there was a pretty big one.
I rejoined the race in 11th place. I could not even see 12th place as I'm rejoining, and I stayed in 11th, but I did catch that lead pack by the end of it. But I guess to kind of circle back on this, I was so mad because I was actually having a good day for once, and Ryan and Keith Scharf came up to me because they were race directing that race. They're like, "Hey, you got any GoPro footage? Like, can we look at it?" And I was like so mad. I'm like, "Don't talk to me right now." I did not want anybody to talk to me, because I just wasn't about it. But no, I mean we're cool now. I'm not mad about it.
No, and I went up and talked to. Our decision was made before Keith asked you for the GoPro footage. Like I'd already called it in that he was going to get put behind you, and I walked up to Matt. I was like, "Hey, Matt, I'm sorry I got to do this to you, but you're going to get put behind Zach." And he's like, "For what?" I was like, "You dumped him." He's like, "Yeah, I did."
Well, the funny part about that is Ryan came up to me. He's like, "Hey, can I look at your GoPro footage?" And I got so crappy with Ryan. I'm like, he was behind me. How are you going to see, like, my GoPro's pointing forward? How are you going to be able
That's
to tell
what I wanted
Ryan?
to see. I wanted to make sure you couldn't see him at all in the GoPro.
Yeah, and I got so crappy about it.
Yeah, you were butthurt, but I didn't blame you.
Yeah.
I would have been too. I probably would have if it were anybody else. Like, if let's take it back, freaking 10 years. Like I had a similar incident with this kid named Grant Quinlan. Raced against.
Yeah, he raced an
ARCA.
ARCA. He raced an ARCA. Yeah.
So Grant in a in a heat race for one of the Rotax races. He dumps me at Long Pond at Newcastle. So I like, my race is over. It's even in 2-cycle, it's a draft pack at Newcastle. So I'm sitting there and I waited for him, and he comes out in front of me because it screwed him too. Like, he lost the lead pack, so I waited for him, and I just got back on track right behind him, and I stuck in his draft. And the next time we went through Long Pond, I put him into the pond. I didn't. He didn't. He fully was in the pond.
Now that's
because it's a hairpin corner. You're supposed to brake. I just didn't.
Yeah.
That's what happened to one of the front noses.
You decided to use him as a brake. Oh, yeah. That's what happened to one of the front noses, huh? You just used him?
Wait, is that the kid that you broke his exhaust on the start?
Yep.
You gotta tell
I hated that kid. That kid. Oh, okay.
So you gotta tell that story.
Back in the day, this is incriminating, but it's reciprocal. I think it's been long enough. But back in the day, the Rotaxes, our exhaust pipes used to be so long that they would sometimes hang over the rear bumper, especially if you ran a metal rear bumper. And at the time, Burrell didn't have a plastic rear bumper on their karts. They only had the metal. And so this kid starts in front of me, and I hate him. I hate this kid. I hated racing against him. Every time we were on the track together, we wrecked each other. So I just didn't want to have a bad race. I didn't want to get wrecked. So on the outlap, I saw that his exhaust was hanging over a little too far. So I would back off and drill him every corner on the outlap. And then I broke his exhaust off before the race even started. Cold. So he was immediately like, you have to stop because you'll blow up the engine if you run without an exhaust. Yeah. But
that's a different level.
That was the dirtiest thing I've ever done in my career, but the kid deserved it. Trust me.
Jeez.
That's wild.
I don't know if Grant's going to watch this. Huh?
He probably will. He'll probably watch it.
So let's kind of move forward, moving from F1, moving into 500. We've already talked about this quite a bit. Austin Cindric, a rookie, winning the race. Pretty epic, I think. 8th career start. I think the only person that could top that, winning the 500 in your 8th start, would be Trevor Bayne, winning the 500 in his 2nd start. But regardless, an incredible feat. Austin Cindric, for context, won the Xfinity race at Daytona last year and was the Xfinity champion in 2020. So, guys, let's open this up for discussion. I know he kind of did it in a rough way. He shoved Blaney into the wall coming to the flag. How we feel about that? How we feel about the race in general? Do we feel like Austin Cindric is a worthy Daytona 500 champion?
Absolutely, 100% he is worthy of this Daytona 500 championship. I think, you put your teammate in your wall. As Ryan said in the pre-show, you throw your brother, you throw your sister into the wall to win this race.
Yeah.
So, in that case, yes, you throw anybody you'd want to win the Daytona 500. And Austin ran a class act race, like anybody else. And I think a lot of that has to do with running the race last year in the Penske satellite car, 3rd car, quote unquote. Actually, it'd be their 4th car, quote unquote, technically.
Yeah, it was a proper Penske car, the Verizon car.
So I think being able to run that to give a little bit of experience in last year, and he was up in the front last year too. I think he got a piece of the wreck in last year's 500
he got
finish.
wiped out. His car
he got wiped out in that. But the fact to be there at the end and to go ahead and win Daytona the day before that race and to win Daytona now, I think you throw him up there with Ryan Blaney, Joey Logano, and even, I guess you could throw Bubba Wallace's name in there now as one of the top restrictor plate racers in the sport.
Well,
I would agree.
You look at the way he did it. It's not like he just rode around at the back of the field and was he was pushing Keselowski.
He was there all race.
He was pushing other Fords. He was pushing other drivers. He was a factor all race. He didn't make a mistake. That's one thing you worry about with a rookie racing in these not restrictor plates anymore, but super speedway races.
True.
You worry about them causing a wreck, making a mistake on pit road. Overheating the car from pushing somebody for too long, just minor things like that you wouldn't normally think about for a veteran. But for him to put all the pieces together in his 2nd 500 attempt to to bring it home. It really says a lot. People rag on Austin Cindric because he's Tim Cindric's son. Tim Cindric is the president of Penske, obviously. People rag on him because he's always had these opportunities because of who his dad is. However, there are a lot of kids that have opportunities in racing because of who their parents are or who their parents know. And really, at the end of the day, it's what you do with those opportunities. And what he's done with his opportunities, obviously, it's pretty clear. You look at his resume; he's a very accomplished driver, as a very young driver.
I have to agree with that, and I think Cindric's also one of those low key. He's a very low key guy. He's super humble, and he's really really talented.
Yeah.
I mean, if anyone's been following NASCAR, he's not a new name. So I wasn't really shocked to see him win at all, and I think he's going to be there for wins all season. But yeah, I'm super happy for him. I think it was also kind of cool that Penske was there for it, and it was his birthday. Roger Penske really isn't seen that much in person, at least at the big events he is. But he is getting older, so it's cool to see him get another 500. And then also it's kind of ironic that he was in Keselowski's old ride, same scheme, number, everything, and they were pushing most of the race too, which is kind of funny. But
yeah,
it's one thing I noticed.
I was actually gonna say, like, if Keselowski beat the number 2 and it was those two coming to the line, I would have thought that would have been ironic as well. But I think Cindric deserved it, and there's a lot, and like Zach said, there's a lot of guys who have a lot of opportunities, but are just that good. Max Verstappen's classic example. He had a lot of opportunities opened up to him by his dad. And Max is one of the best drivers. Well, right now is the best driver in the world. So, I don't think anybody can disagree with that. I remember when he first came into the sport, and I'm guilty of thinking it too. Oh, he's just a silver spoon kid. He's not gonna amount to much. And he changed my whole perspective on that, because he really knows how to fight. Like, there's not a lot of drivers in Formula One that know how to fight like Max. And I would say Austin's shown that through his junior career in NASCAR, and he won a lot in Xfinity. He was really good. And this weekend, yesterday proved that. I think he did a fantastic job.
You got to keep in mind, this is somebody that started on the road racing side. Austin Cindric has raced everything. I believe back when it was named Pro Mazda, I believe he competed in that at one point. He competed in Rallycross. He's competed in sports cars. He's got a wide resume of stuff that he's competed in, and he's just like an all-around great driver.
IndyCar.
Tidbit note, he actually raced in a USF 2000 with Pabst Racing too. Yeah. He actually won a race with them as well. So that's cool to see. One thing I want to touch on though that would happen through the race was I noticed a lot of how fragile the cars were, and how easy it was to pop tires.
Yeah.
Compared to what we've seen recently.
I noticed a few wheels breaking too, and it's kind of crazy.
Cascarala.
Yeah, well, it's crazy to think about this. So when they switched from which by the way I liked this move, to switch from 5 lugs to a single lug wheel, they said that was to relieve stress from the wheel. To have 1 lug versus 5, having that center lug was supposed to be better for the wheel, create less stress on it, which makes sense, especially with the tire is actually different. It's an 18-inch wheel now, and the tires are wider. But I guess to kind of put this into perspective, we had wheels breaking in the race, which is kind of crazy because we made this change to prevent this, and it's still an issue. So it's kind of crazy that, man, if they would have stuck with 5 lugs, how much more of an issue would this have been? It's kind of crazy to think about.
So so this is something that we kind of go over with in engineering classes. And the thing with the 5 lug is it was 5 different pressure points on the wheel, and and they also switched, I believe, the original wheels were steel, the ones that they had last year. I think the wheels they have now are magnesium, if I'm correct.
Yes, they are magnesium.
Okay, so you can't have 5 lugs with mags. It's too many pressure points, and magnesium is really strong, but it cracks. And when you have multiple pressure points, that's when you create a crack. If you have a singular point, they don't tend to crack. And that's the logic behind that. But what I saw was happening when you're having the wheels break like that is they would always break after they would make some sort of contact. And then all it takes is, because it's such a thin sidewall compared to what they used to run, once the tire loses a little bit of air, it's on that rim immediately, and now you've created another point of impact that's on a rotating mass. And when you create that point of impact, the stress fractures just go everywhere, and that's when you're going to break the wheel. So
That
it's
actually
not
makes
really
a lot of sense.
Yeah, so it's not really a factor of like whether 5 is better than 1. It's just the nature of magnesium wheels. And I think staying with the 18-inch wheels is a good idea because it's more realistic to an average day car. And you're not going to see a car nowadays that's got a 6-inch sidewall like the old tires did. So I and you're going to see it happen, but if anything, it should clean up the racing a little bit, because I feel like NASCAR is very much a no holds barred when it comes to their racing. They let the boys handle it, and they put this thing into the lap of the boys of like, if you race too aggressively, now you're going to break your stuff and you're going to screw yourself for the race. Whereas before, you could clobber somebody in the corner and it wasn't going to do anything. And the fact that the cars are more fragile because they've got the independent rear suspension, there's more working parts to the car now. It's just putting that to another level of, you cannot constantly blow somebody out of the water going into a corner. You can't send them to China every time. And you have to be really calculated. The moves and the aggression is going to be a lot more calculated.
That's fair. Can we talk about Fox's coverage?
I was actually going to bring this up because I think they tie up with Bozo of the Week of Brad Keselowski and Nick Schwartz.
Sanchez.
Sanchez,
so
excuse me. Thank you.
We talked about this when we reviewed the Clash, that the coverage was not great. Like, a lot of their shots were like too tight, or they focused way too much on onboard shots. Kind of seemed like they were trying to fill in coverage with these onboard shots, but was, at least for the Clash, was super unnecessary because there's always battles to look at. But then you look at the 500 and they did the same thing. And not to mention, and Ryan and I were sitting right next to each other when this happened in the race, and we said it right away. They were on board with was it Kyle Busch? They were on board with
It was Busch.
It was Hamlin.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
it was Hamlin. So they're on board with Hamlin. You just see Kyle Busch and Hamlin and Byron go spinning to the infield, and then the shot it changes to a shot of Byron hitting the inside wall head on, and then also Kyle Busch
not seeing
spinning. You don't see the other cars, and then Clint Bowyer's like, I think a car flipped, and it's like, what? So and we wait for like 30 seconds, 45 seconds, a minute, whatever it was, for them to show a replay, and then you see Harrison Burton flipped. I'm like, how do you miss that?
And the thing is, too, with the shot is, like, if you wait 2 or 3 seconds later, you see Harrison Burton come to the flame, flipping right in front of the onboard camera shot they were just on.
Yeah. And like, I just don't the guys back in in 1979, when they had the very first coverage of the Daytona 500, and Bobby Allison or Donnie Allison or Bobby, one of the Allison
Donnie
brothers
Allison
gets in a
and
fit.
Cale Yarborough.
They get into that fist fight. The camera footage was perfect for that, so I don't know how it could have possibly gotten worse from 1979 to 2022. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It's like we've come back.
Like, I get it's racing. You have no idea when a wreck's going to happen. It can happen at any given time when the green flag's in the air. But when you start to see something go bad, you normally transition to a wide-angle shot that gets majority of the wreck, not just two cars going on the inside. Granted, it was nice to see if William Byron was going to hit the wall or not, to see if he was in the race or out. But there were 2 or 3 other cars that were wrecking on top of the racetrack that we could have seen. Like, if it weren't for the replay cameras, I would have known that Christopher Bell hit the wall, Ross Chastain came into the wreck, or Alex Bowman piled into the back of Harrison Burton. You wouldn't know that.
I think as far as go ahead, Zach.
Also, I want to point out,
I think as far as commentating, it was spot on, especially Tony Stewart being in the booth. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I do
Commentate
have,
was perfect.
yeah, they were awesome.
Tony
But
Stewart and
as far
Clint
as
Boyer.
production, it was absolutely horrible. And then another thing y'all didn't mention was one of like I think it was someone's transaxle broke coming to the checker, and literally like 4 seconds before the wreck happened, they went to like an ad of an ARCA driver starting to talk, and the cutout came on, and then the wreck started, and she said like 4 words, and then they just cut her back off, and it was just like the goofiest thing I've ever seen on live TV. Brutal to see.
Yeah, that was. I think they were talking about Amber Balkan, ARCA driver, and I forget who it was that broke or spun or something. But yeah, you're right. You're exactly right.
It was.
His
I think it was the
transaxle
Tyler
just
Reddick
broke.
crash.
Yeah.
When Reddick broke his rear axe, his transaxle broke, and that's when Logano and Kurt Busch went to the infield crash, and Logano popped his both rear tires and went 3 laps down.
That's
another thing I want. Go ahead, Zach.
That's the second transaxle that Tyler Reddick has had break this year, by the way.
Crazy, isn't it?
And
we've only done 2 races.
Yeah.
Another thing I wanted to talk about was the lack of communication, I want to say, between either pit reporters or the production team, because there were a couple of guys who had some failures or problems happen. Like, for instance, I was doing DraftKings myself. I had Ty Dillon on one of my teams. He was 2 laps down. I had no idea he went 2 laps down.
Yeah.
It would have been nice to know guys who kind of fell back. Like Greg Biffle went off the track for 44 laps or 31 laps, and we had no idea. Like I was literally on Twitter looking at Jeff Gluck or Bob Cockris, seeing what was happening on the racetrack.
Yeah, you know what? The only reason that I knew about it, and I looked over and I told Ryan this during the race, was the only reason that I knew that Biffle went behind the wall was because somebody in a Facebook group that I'm in posted on one of the threads for the race that Greg Biffle was having an issue with his engine, and he pulled into the pits, and then they went behind the wall to fix it. And they didn't talk about it. They talked about it after he got lapped, after he came back onto the racetrack, but they didn't really talk about it.
It would just be nice from especially even with the 500 being the biggest race and try to introduce new fans to the sport itself, and you have the most people watching this race. If you were to integrate what was happening on the racetrack, whether it's your favorite driver or any driver in the field, what happens if they come off the track for a specific reason, if they fell back for a specific reason, you just would like to know.
I think that was super important they missed out on was, I believe, Daniel Suarez went up in flames on the backstretch. They completely blew that, and that's Pitbull's team.
Yeah,
I honestly, I didn't even know that happened until you just mentioned it.
I
had no idea that happened.
Aware of this.
And two, he has an entirely different audience that specifically watches just for him from his home country. So it's that's just an absolute blown coverage right there. So
yeah, it's crazy. Just mind-boggling to know the coverage, what it was back a few years ago to what it has become now, in this sense to where how they've dropped so many balls in this case. All right, let's go ahead and move on to our last topic that I would go into our predictions for this week, which is preview at IndyCar at St. Petersburg. It is the first race of the NTT IndyCar season for the 2022 campaign. Obviously, we know Joseph Newgarden and Colton Herta are going to be the odds-on favorites going in. Alex Palou is defending his title going into this season. But, guys, what are we expecting going into St. Petersburg with the first IndyCar race this year?
Ryan, you want to go? Gotcha.
Jed, I'll start with you. What are your...
I think you're going to straight up just see Colton Herta dominate again. It's no secret Andretti has a good package for the bumpy street courses, and I think Colton Herta is the best he'll ever be right now. So I think you're going to see him dominate. I think some dark horses of the weekend could be Kirkwood and Malukas. They're definitely better than some of the other drivers that are out there, that's for sure. It'll just be interesting to see how they are in their first weekend in the big leagues. And then I think it's also going to be interesting to see guys like Rossi, Power, Takuma Sato, who aren't necessarily at a stalemate, but they're at a point in their career where it's okay, you either got to keep performing, or you're looking at 2-3 years left in your ride, kind of which has happened with Ryan Hunter-Reay. So yeah, it's definitely there's lots of storylines going into the weekend. It's going to be a good race, that's for sure.
Ryan?
I'm gonna just to make people mad. I'm calling Scotty Dixon to win it because he always can find his way to be in the top 5 at the end of the race, and I think he's due. He didn't have a great season last year, but he didn't have a bad season. So. Yeah, he was 4th. Oh, that sucks for him,
So
considering
bad,
he's
so
always
bad.
battling for the title.
Right. All right. Zach, your take on the NTT IndyCar season opener at St. Pete?
So for a winner, ooh, that's tough. So my boy Joey Newjive, he's always really good at St. Pete. So an easy pick would be to take him. However, Colton Herta is also very good at St. Pete.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Did you guys? I was in the bathroom. For anybody that doesn't know, did you guys do IndyCar champion or did you guys just do St. Pete?
We have now. We're just doing picks right now. So you're going with Colton Herta is going to win the race.
I'm going to go Newgarden. I am going to go Newgarden.
Yeah.
Newgarden to win the race.
Okay.
Yeah, he's won there twice.
I think twice.
Maybe more. I think twice. Yeah.
He's solid there for sure.
Jed, who are you going for winner?
Championship. Colton Herta, 100%.
Winner of the race.
I think he's going to pick off right where he left off last.
Going Colton Herta. All right, I'm going to kind of go in between all of you guys, and I'm going to go say Palou gets it done. I think Palou comes back on the top and picks off right where he let off. He won the season opener last year at Barber, given it's a different track. I think Palou is going to win the race out at St. Pete this weekend because he was close at Long Beach to end the year off last year too. So I think he's going to have the best shot to win the race. And our boy Nate, who could not make it tonight, he's going with Colton Herta as well. So we got 3 people going for Colton Herta to win the race. All right, boys, championship picks time. We're going for IndyCar champions before the season starts. Early predictions. Zach, we'll start off with you. Who's going to win the championship early on?
This is a very tough one because we had an insane championship last year where you had Alex Palou, who kind of flew under the radar. Nobody really expected him to come in and win in the second Ganassi car.
Except for me.
Except for Ryan. Because for the most part, the second car at Ganassi really had not been strong since, Franchitti was there, maybe the first year that TK was there. So, it was really hard to put faith in whoever was in it just because it wasn't that strong. And then Palou comes out and did what he did. But you also had guys like O'Ward and Herta. Newgarden was still a factor. Dixon was still a factor. Then you had guys like Grosjean that would, get on the podium. Renus VK won a race. For champion, I'm going to say Colton Herta. He's due to just put a season together. He's had some good ones. Mm-hmm. He's had some bad ones. But he always ends up, towards the front in points at the end of the season. I think as long as he can put a season together, he's got the pace. He's going to do it at some point.
He's starting to sound like his dad. He's had a lot of really good seasons come really close.
Yeah.
All right, let's go around the room. Ryan, who are you going for champion?
I am going for my boy Pato O'Ward. He was so close last year. I think Pato's going to do it. He's in a league right now, and nobody's more aggressive than him. I take him in a night fight over anybody in that field.
Okay. All right. I'm up for that.
Ryan,
Jed, who are you going with?
I was honestly going to be my pick, but thinking about last season, Joseph Newgarden wasn't too far away from the championship, and he had literally the worst luck out of anyone. Started the season with just a horrible wreck. So I think with the consistency he showed, he may not be the guy like Pato to go out there and lay down wicked fast times for pole and stuff, but that kid is so consistent every year. So I'm gonna go with him.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he's gonna be a top favorite as well. But there's one guy who I think has been resurgence throughout the course of the year, and I feel like he's due for another one. And I think the way he's been driving lately, he's capable of doing it. I'm going Elio Castroneves. Gets another IndyCar title.
See, Helio's never won a title.
Helio's never won a title.
He's never won a title.
Oh yeah, he's never won a title. That's right, actually.
He's won an
Dude,
IMSA
that would
title.
be cool. I don't think there's a single person who watches IndyCar who wouldn't be a fan of Helio winning a title.
So, like, I grew up a Team Penske stan. Elio was my guy since I was like 8 years old.
Briscoe was mine.
Yeah, so Elio finished second in points. I don't know how many times. And then, like, he kind of fell off a little bit. And then, like, 2013, 2014, 2015 had a really good run. And then he got let go from the full-time ride at the end of 2017 to go run IMSA. He really didn't get to go off on his own terms. And now Mike Shank has given him that opportunity. And Elio has shown that he's still capable of competing at a high level. I think something interesting that none of us talked about, not only Elio, but also Simon Pagenaud. New guy at Meyer Shank. Remember when Simon drove for Schmidt, when it was Schmidt-Peterson Motorsports, was a Honda team, and Simon won races for them. They were not a top-tier team, but they were a good team. Meyer Shank is a good team. I'm just saying, I feel like you got to watch out for Pagenaud because 2014, driving for Schmidt-Peterson, I believe he finished third or fourth in the championship. So that's another guy to watch out for.
He's definitely going to be a dark horse this year, no doubt about it. Definitely going to be a dark horse. I think that whole Shank team has come alive recently in the past year.
Helio, I did the history report on it. I believe Helio is the only driver to ever win a Daytona 24-hour and an Indy 500 with the same team in a calendar year.
Yeah.
Or in a 12 months. Yeah.
Because there's not many teams that run IndyCar and IMSA, at least in the overall.
He does have the opportunity to do it in the same year this year.
He could double up.
He could. And to end off the show with the final picks from our boy Nate, he's going with his boy Christian Lundgaard, the rookie. So
now I think Lundgaard is going to be strong. I just don't see.
I think Lundgaard. I don't know who you pick for rookie of the year because I know David's tough. Kirkwood's
Malukas,
tough.
Yeah.
Lundgaard's tough.
Malukas is tough.
Malukas is a dark horse.
I think Kirkwood by a mile.
Malukas is.
That kid's talented as hell.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Yeah, you Florida boys stick together, don't you?
Be quiet over there, Florida man.
Hey, I want to point this out real quick while we're still on the topic of Elio, or while we're still talking IndyCar. He's finished second in points 4 times. He's finished third in points 3 times, and he's finished fourth in points.
Dude,
5 times.
Those are brutal stats. Those are brutal stats right there.
There's really not. Let's see.
Arguably best IndyCar driver to never win a championship?
What a better way to win a championship than now?
Well, he should get the 5th. He should be the only person to get 5 Indy 500 wins too.
Of this century.
Well, actually, the century.
Of this century, he's finished outside the top 5 in points. 1, 2, 3. At least of full-time seasons, he's finished outside the top 5 3 times in points.
That's crazy.
And that's a 6th in 2005, 6th in 2007, 11th 2011. That was a really bad year, but I mean, you want to talk about consistency throughout a career. I feel like he's heavily overlooked from that standpoint.
Well, it's because he's in the same generation as Scott Dixon, and you get that guy who is arguably the best IndyCar driver in history, just statistically.
Well, think about it. How many times did they duel for the championship? 2008.
A lot.
Literally the last race.
2008 was crazy between them.
Yeah, the last race, Chicagoland. Yeah. It was a photo finish, top 2 in the points. And now it didn't decide the champion, the result of the race. I mean, if Dixon would have finished like 3rd or 4th, we would have had a different story. But Elio won the race. And then in 2013, that's also an underrated championship because there was a lot of drama that led up to the finale at Auto Club. Sonoma with Will Power's crew member getting hit by Dixon. Baltimore, where Power hit Dixon. There's a lot of craziness that went on there.
Yeah.
All right. Well, with that being said, we got ourselves a doubleheader weekend this weekend with IndyCar starting their season out at St. Pete and NASCAR going out west to Fontana. So, guys, final thoughts on the show?
I'm interested to see how the next gen does at Auto Club. Bumpy track, big track.
Yep.
I'm interested to see
Long
if we're
time
going to see.
since anybody's been there.
True.
2 years.
True. Yeah, no rubber down. I'm interested to see how the car handles, bumpy track like that. I'm interested to see if we're gonna have the racing like with the Gen 6, where it's packed together, or maybe like when the Gen 6 first came out, where it's you can string out, but you can still race. It's gonna be interesting. I think I honestly, if I had to predict, I think you're gonna see a mixed bag. I think it's gonna be kind of a pack race, but you can still get strung out, but you still are in control of your own race. That's how I predict it's going to go.
I'm interested to see what the follow-up is because this is technically NASCAR going back to the LA market since the Clash. So I'm kind of interested to see if the Clash boosts any of the ratings out at Fontana and if any new fans actually do decide to go to this Fontana race.
I'd almost be interested to see if it takes the interest for this race because it's such a short turnaround from the Coliseum to this.
Yeah.
Since it's in the same region.
Exactly. All right, fellas. Well, thanks you guys for watching this episode of Arrive and Drive. Tune in next week where we're going to be talking about more of the St. Pete Grand Prix and what else is going to be happening in the racing world. We'll also contact on Fontana as well. So for Ryan Bjerke, Jed Perkins, Zach Buchanan, I'm Jordan Mistig. Thanks for listening to Arrive and Drive.
Good work, boys.